Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 569 for the 8th of September 2019. Richard Saunders here with you from Pier 39 in San Francisco, home of the sea lions, which are lazing and basking around for the hundreds and hundreds of tourists on this cool day to come and see. This has been a major tourist attraction for San Francisco for decades, I think it is, after the sea lions decided to take over part of the floating docks down here. It's quite a sight to see them all lazing about. And the smell. Coming up on this week's show, and the reason why this is episode number 569 soon, coming up on this week's show, we're going to kick off with an interview with Jarry from Quebec, Canada. Now, he has recently put out a wonderful, very interesting video all about ear candling. Oh yes, that evergreen, that pillar of quackery, ear candling. It was an impressive video. I found it very educational, and as you'll find out, it's actually helped me to change a long-standing habit of mine. Find out more when I interview Jarry at the top of the show. Following that, we have a very unusual situation of a travel advisory, a travel alert for residents of New South Wales heading to New Zealand, of all places. Why would there be a travel alert from the New South Wales Health Department for a country like New Zealand? Find out soon. And to round off the show, Maynard heads for Sydney Skeptics in the pub to ask pubbers, ask pubgoers the big question: was there a moment or a point of time, an incident, an event that turned you into a skeptic? Now, the reason this is episode number 569 and not 568 is that episode 568 is the live Skeptic Zone recorded at DragonCon, and you can see that by visiting skepticzone.tv. Now, that was put together by the very hard-working crew of Calico Cove, who were doing the audio-video for DragonCon, Mark Ditzler and his team. And you can see, and they're putting them up bit by bit, you can see lots of videos from the event at video.skeptrack.org, and I will certainly be linking that in the show notes. And it was like I stepped into a TV studio, folks. I've never seen such an elaborate production equipment for a convention before. There was a control room halfway down the SkepTrack room, multiple cameras, lighting, prompters, all sorts of things going on. And it is certainly something to see. Anyway, you can check out the live Skeptic Zone, see the production that went into that at skepticzone.tv. But now it's time for me to walk away from these sea lions. I think they're doing okay. I'm going to find some nice clam chowder and root beer while I'm doing that. I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Joining me now all the way from Montreal in Canada. Now that's a place I'd love to visit. It's somebody whose video I just saw the other day for the first time. I was very impressed. It's Jarry. Hello, Jonathan.
Hi, Richard. How are you?
I'm very well, and I'm very happy to talk with you because some years ago, the Australian Skeptics put out an open letter to the pharmacies of Australia imploring them not to sell ear candles. And I'll link to that on the show notes, folks. You can read that for yourself. And I can still go into pharmacies these days around Sydney anyway and find ear candles, which was a pity. And then a few days ago, I think Michael Marshall posted your video all about ear candles, which was really good from many points of view, and we'll get to the details in a moment. But what inspired you to make that particular video?
Yeah, I used to do a show. So I work for the McGill Office for Science and Society. We're very lucky. We have an office here at McGill that is dedicated to separating sense from nonsense. So I'm a science communicator working for them. I'm essentially a full-time skeptic with a job, which is really quite the privilege. And I had a show that ran for 2 years, which was very much in the vein of what John Oliver and Jon Stewart have been doing. And it wasn't particularly snarky, but there was, that kind of late night talk show sort of deep dive format does bring out a bit of snark and a bit of sarcasm and cynicism. And over the past year, I've really started thinking about tone when it comes to skepticism, about how we go about trying to persuade other people. Because I think that we do have a bit of a PR problem, which is that we are often perceived as arrogant and know-it-alls, and, facts don't care about your feelings, that type of stuff. And unfortunately, feelings don't care about facts. And I've been really inspired by other types of videos or TV shows that I've seen that have found a different way of talking about this skeptical message. We have a fantastic science communicator on the French side here in Montreal called Olivier Bernard. You can see some of his stuff in English at thepharmafist.com. And he has a TV show that is the best TV show on skepticism that I've seen. And it's really about taking the viewer on a journey to the conclusion, as opposed to just being very paternalistic and saying, hey, this thing doesn't work. I've looked at the studies. Trust me on this. So I wanted to do a video that was more in that vein of, let me show you why your candles don't work. We'll start together not knowing what the answer is. And after, 15 minutes, we'll have a concrete evidence that this thing not only doesn't work, but is actually quite dangerous. So I took one of these ear candles to the chemistry lab at McGill, and we hooked it up to a pressure sensor, because the claim, of course, is that when you stick this in your ear, you light it on fire, it creates a vacuum, and this will grab the earwax inside your ear and just pull it out. But of course, you need to create a very powerful vacuum to do that, and there's no detectable vacuum when you do this. This was also tested in a paper from 1996.
And we'll just play a quick clip from the video now.
So I just bought my ear candles. Here they are. We're told ear candling can help treat sinus infections, relieve headaches, improve vision.
We definitely don't practice it ourselves, and we often deal with the complications of ear candling and things that have happened when it didn't go well.
$40. Okay. There's a health center charging $40 and recommending 2 to 3 sessions with their homemade candles. How effective Health Canada can truly be at regulating this and protecting the public. What I'm holding in my hands right now is essentially illegal in Canada and in the United States. Now, I didn't commit an illegal act by purchasing these ear candles, but the person who sold them to me, they kind of did. So, how did I get my hands on these? So that was the idea behind the video, is slowly to take people through this thing, and then also to make them understand why these ear candles are actually illegal in Canada and the United States. So you cannot legally sell or import them inside the country for medical reasons. But of course, the twist is that some people manage to sell them anyway because they're not making medical claims, and that's where Health Canada says, well, it's touchy. We're not quite sure how to deal with this. And also, Health Canada, like any big government organization, they don't necessarily have the resources to go after all of the quacks and the charlatans that are selling all of these kinds of products. So it is up to us, the skeptics, and to the public to denounce these things when they pop up.
It's absolutely true, and you make an interesting point, because as one of our reporters, Heidi Robinson, will tell you, when she was dealing with raw milk, the situation back in Australia with raw milk, people were selling it as bath milk. You can bathe in raw milk, but really, they were selling it to people who wanted to drink the stuff. But I love the video because you're right. You take people through the stages. You have a look at it. You turn up at the lab. You do the testing, and we can all see for ourselves. But there's no detectable vacuum caused, which is the number one selling point of ear candles. It creates a vacuum which draws up the wax. And then you speak to another scientist who has changed my life, because I will now no longer use earbuds in my ear.
I see. Well, the earbuds are fine. The point that the ear, nose, and throat specialist was making was that you shouldn't put anything inside your ear canal, including Q-tips. And I was kind of surprised to hear this, but it's true. Like on the back of the packaging of Q-tips, it says, "Do not put this in your ear canal," because you can actually push earwax further down and make the problem worse.
And I love the way that she explained the reason for earwax, and it just made so much sense that it's changed my life.
All right.
Science has changed my life. But of course, now folks, I will link to the video in this week's show notes so you can see it for yourself, and I encourage you to do so. It's very well done. I compliment you on your production values too.
Thank you. I'm a bit of a production value nerd, I guess. I also have, this video is part of the podcast that I do. I've been doing this for 4.5 years with a cardiologist, Dr. Christopher Labos. Mm-hmm. And when we started, I also wanted very good sound quality on the show. So we have some very good microphones. We also do a Vox Pop segment on the show. So we go out with a comedian. We talk to people on the street. We ask them what they think about, whatever it is that we're talking about, if it's treatment for baldness or vaping or diet pills or autism. And we also we work with musicians, so they come up with a jingle to help our listeners remember the take-home message for the episode. Production values is important to me because as skeptics, we often complain that the other side, the pseudoscientists and the alternative healers, they have very good production values. They have these, you see these docuseries now online, these 9-hour-long documentaries on 5G and all those kinds of things, and they're very well produced because again, you can buy prosumer gear and get these very good production values, do some color grading, all that kind of stuff. But skeptics, I think that we've been lagging behind in that department. Our stuff tends to be a little bit more on the creaky side. So I've been trying to sort of up the game as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, no, it looks good.
Now, how does that tie in with body of evidence? Is that the same thing we're talking about?
Yeah, so the Body of Evidence is a podcast it was pitched to me by this local medical doctor that I met about 5 years ago. We were both doing science communication on the side. I had a different podcast at the time. I interviewed him for it, and he said, "Hey, I've always been meaning to do a podcast on medical topics, on health topics, something kind of funny but also very evidence based because again, there's a lot of noise and nonsense on the health front." And so we ended up creating this monthly podcast that started again about 4.5 years ago on all of these different topics, vitamins and vaping and dieting and all those sorts of topics. And to try and show people the best available, what does the body of evidence on a particular topic actually show, to teach them basic notions on epidemiology and on scientific methodology, like why do we trust this particular study but not that study? What was the problem with that study? And the second half of the show is more topical, so we deal with what's been in the news in the past month. Often, what did the media get wrong about a new study on health? Why did they think we're going to get a cure for Parkinson's disease in 5 to 10 years, but that's not what the study actually shows. And we try to do it with a lot of humor. We have an opening skit at the beginning that's quite comedic. And as I mentioned, we work with comedians and musicians. And I think that's something that, again, skeptics could do more of. I mean, it's been very valuable to us to have people who are also skeptically minded, but who don't have a background in science or medicine. They want to contribute to the skeptical movement, but they can't, look at the evidence and come up with some kind of conclusion, but they can sing, they can play the guitar, they can design websites, they can be funny. All of those traits and these capabilities, they can really help make our product even more fun and entertaining and palatable.
Now, just before we came on air to have a little chat, you were telling me about some recent news, I think it's recent news, about homeopathy in pharmacies in Canada. What's the story there?
Yes, I'm very happy about this. So as your listeners may know, the Center for Inquiry in the United States is suing Walmart because they're selling homeopathy, and they're making it look like this is a genuine treatment. And what they basically want is have some sort of signage in the store saying, there's no good evidence that this thing works. I've heard from some skeptics saying, well, this could never possibly happen because, they would lose so much business. But it has happened here in Quebec. It is feasible. And we didn't even need to sue anybody. We kind of got lucky. Basically, we now have signs in pharmacies in front of homeopathic products that are still being sold there, unfortunately, but we do have signs that say that there's no good scientific evidence behind them. Please talk to your pharmacist if you have any questions. And we got there because, again, what this whole thing taught me is that you really need to look at the system that is enabling these things to happen, to exist, because there might be a weak point in the system, a cog that you can work on. And this is what inadvertently happened in this case. So I wanted to get more news coverage on homeopathy, but it's very difficult because there's nothing new about it. So how do you get the attention of the media? Well, you create news. You have to generate new data. And so I called up 150 pharmacies all over the island of Montreal to ask them if they had a specific product, a homeopathic product against the flu, and 2/3 of them carried the product. And so that's a new data point that we didn't have before. That generated a lot of publicity. This was in the middle of flu season. And one journalist wanted to know if pharmacists would actually endorse the product. And so he did some really good back-to-basics gumshoe journalistic work. He went to 20 pharmacies in Montreal. He spoke to the staff there. And 1/3 of them said, no, don't buy this. 1/3 said, well, I'm not sure. You might as well try. And 1/3 said, yeah, this will definitely work. And that was front-page news for one of the biggest French-language newspapers in Quebec. And he asked for comments from the Order of Pharmacists of Quebec, and the order said, well, we're very surprised by this. We're going to remind our pharmacists, that if they do recommend these products, that they're going to find themselves in a bad place with regards to professional ethics. And he also got comments from the ABCPQ. Now, the ABCPQ is a local association of pharmacy chains in Quebec. And that particular association said, well, you know what we're going to do? We're going to print out 6,000 signs. They will be optional. We can't force anybody to put them up in their store, but we're going to mail them to every pharmacy in Quebec, and they can put them up next to the homeopathic products that they're selling. And we're also going to complain to Health Canada because ultimately Health Canada is approving these products. And so a few months go by, nothing happened. And then a friend of mine texted me one day and he said, here's what I found at my local drugstore. What is this? And the picture, sure enough, was of a sign there in front of the homeopathic products. And so we got confirmation the ABCPQ had printed those signs. They were up. There's now been a second printing. They're bigger, they're green, they're very hard to miss. They're optional, but, because the thing about homeopathy is that a lot of people who buy it don't realize what it is.
Yes.
And so they think that it's just natural stuff and that it must work because it's being sold in a pharmacy. Well, now there's a sign that is hard to ignore that says, actually, there's no good evidence that this thing is going to work. Please talk to your pharmacist. And it creates a bit of a weird situation where you go, well, why are you selling this if you're telling me that it doesn't work? And that's good because it highlights the hypocrisy in the system. It highlights the fact that pharmacies are, after all, businesses, and they want to make money. I mean, they're selling us chips and chocolate and soda, and we know that these things are not great for health. But at least it highlights this hypocrisy, and hopefully some people will be better informed next time they go and shop for these things.
I think if I were you, you may have done this already. You'd get one of these signs and have it framed.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I should put this up on my wall.
Absolutely. Now, folks, yes, I encourage you to have a look at all the work that Jonathan's been doing. There's some really interesting vlogs up there on the YouTube channel, things about regression to the mean, anecdotes, drugs and the media, lots of things to look at. And again, start off with a bang, start off with the fascinating video about ear candling, and of course a direct link to that in the show notes. Well, Jonathan, what a pleasure it has been to meet you via the strange interwebs and interview you. And what's next? What's next on the horizon?
What's next on the horizon? Well, I continue to do work for the McGill OSS, so that's at mcgill.ca/OSS. The podcast, The Body of Evidence, is still going on if people want to find it on their local podcasting app. I give talks locally in Montreal. I'm in the media quite a bit. And also in October, I will be speaking at SciCon. So that's a big skeptical conference in Las Vegas that happens every year. I was there 2 years ago as a meek attendee. I interviewed a few people there for the McGill OSS YouTube channel, and now I've been invited as a speaker. So I'll be talking on stage a little bit about what I just talked about today, about the homeopathy thing, about all the really cool stuff that's been happening for skepticism in Canada, and also about how to join up, how to help sort of defend science for the public, because I think we need more skeptics to go from being passive consumers to being activists, and there are a lot of different ways of going about this.
Yes, you're absolutely right, and it's good to see that someone like you are putting to good use lots of different skills, lots of different skill sets. Well, Jonathan, again, I'll link to everything in the show notes, but for now, thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard.
Psychon 2019. People are finally starting to wake up. Anti-vaxxers denounced as a danger to the public. Climate change deniers exposed as ideological zealots. Celebrity psychics have been caught red-handed using trickery. Homeopathy debunked as fake medicine. Flat earthers. Seriously? Skeptics must seize this moment. Now is the time for the brightest minds in science and reason to come together to turn the tide against pseudoscience, conspiracy theories, and alternative facts. And naturally, we should do it in Vegas. It's more fun that way. Now is the time for Psychon 2019, October the 16th to the 20th at the Flamingo Resort in Las Vegas. The incredible lineup of speakers includes actor John Delancey of Star Trek and Breaking Bad, Julia Sweeney of SNL and Letting Go of God, string theory pioneer Brian Greene, evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins, ex-naturopath Britt-Marie Hermes, and many more, including entertainment by illusionist Banachek and comedian Leanne Lord. For more information, visit www.csiconference.org. Now, sometimes it's hard to believe some of the news and information the Skeptic Zone brings you. Here's a press release from New South Wales Health dated the 5th of September 2019. Measles alert for travellers to New Zealand. New South Wales Health is urging New South Wales residents to be fully vaccinated against measles before travelling to New Zealand, where almost 1,000 cases have been reported this year. So far in 2019, 4 measles cases have been introduced to New South Wales from New Zealand travellers, and that number could rapidly increase due to a recent surge of cases in New Zealand since early August. This highly contagious disease presents a risk not only to travellers and their families, but also to the wider New South Wales community if people return from their travels infectious with measles, Dr. Shepherd said. Dr. Shepherd said anyone travelling to New Zealand should ensure they are fully vaccinated against measles before departure. Infants aged 6 months or older should also receive a dose of measles vaccine before leaving Australia. In the past 2 weeks, people travelling between New Zealand and New South Wales may have exposed others to the infection in the following locations. Friday, the 23rd of August, Air New Zealand flight NZ711 from Auckland to Sydney International Airport T1, arriving around 9:10 p.m. Saturday, 25th of August, Air New Zealand flight NZ108 from Sydney International Airport T1 to Auckland, departing at 7:50 p.m. Friday, the 30th of August to Wednesday, the 3rd of September, various locations in the Byron Bay area. Measles, introduced by travellers, has resulted in secondary cases in recent days in Penrith and Hazelbrook, Wallsend, Glensdale, Kotara and other locations in the Hunter. New South Wales Health Director
communicable diseases, Dr. Vicky Shepherd, said people who have been in the same known locations as those with measles should be alert to symptoms. It can take up to 18 days for symptoms to appear following exposure to a person with measles. Anyone who develops symptoms should arrange to see their GP and call ahead to ensure they don't wait alongside other patients, Dr. Shepherd said. Symptoms to watch out for include fever, sore eyes and a cough, followed 3 or 4 days later by a red, blotchy rash that spreads from the head to the rest of the body. Local public health units are following up with people who may have been in contact with the 4 measles cases and are issuing media releases about specific venues where community members may have been exposed. Full details of the exposure sites and times have been published on the New South Wales Health website, health.nsw.gov.au. Measles is a vaccine-preventable disease that is spread through the air when someone who is infectious with the disease coughs or sneezes. Measles is one of the most contagious diseases for humans, but 2 doses of measles, mumps, rubella vaccine provide lifelong protection against measles in 99 out of 100 vaccinated people, Dr. Shepherd said. New South Wales Health makes the measles vaccine available free for infants from 6 months of age and anyone born during or after 1966 who doesn't have 2 documented doses of measles vaccine. If you're unsure whether you've been vaccinated against measles in the past, it's safe to have a dose. The New South Wales government is investing $130 million in the 2019-2020 immunisation program budget, including Commonwealth and state vaccines. For more information, visit health.nsw.gov.au/measles. And that's Measles Alert for travellers to New Zealand, issued on the 5th of September 2019. And I'll link to that in the show notes so you can read that release for yourself. And it's largely thanks to the untiring efforts of that anti-vaccination crowd that have convinced thousands of parents around the world not to vaccinate their children. And this, I think, is largely due to conspiracy theories. And as my friend Tim Farley might say, well, what's the harm? The Surf Coast Summer Spring Skeptic Camp, 14th of September. The Surf Coast Summer Spring Skeptic Camp, SCSSC, is Australia's longest running Skeptic Camp. This year we are celebrating our 7th year. If you want to share something on a skeptically related topic in which you are interested, highlight some practices that you see as dubious that need to be brought to the attention of the skeptical community, please offer to share your thoughts. This is a sharing event where many contributors combine to make a great day. The event is free. However, please provide your own lunch, but don't worry, there are plenty of options locally. Tea, coffee and biscuits will be provided all day. That's Saturday the 14th of September 2019, 10:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. The location is Aireys Inlet Community Hall, 6 Great Ocean Road, Aireys Inlet, Victoria. Offers to present should be made to the Skeptic Groups of Victoria email address at sgofvic@gmail.com. And to register, just follow the links in this week's show notes. The Surf Coast Summer Spring Skeptic Camp, Australia's longest running Skeptic Camp.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Yes, it's Sydney. People are wandering around the street. They're running around. They're thinking about taking legal action if the lights don't change fast enough because they've got to get home because everyone's rushing and bushing to pay too much rent here in Sydney, as it is Sydney's Skeptics in the pub. I've been tasked with the question of asking everybody, what was the moment that turned you a skeptic? What was the moment? Was it an event, an incident, a happening that made you go, that's it, I'm so down with critical thinking now? Famously, Lawrence Leung in his show talks about his experiences with Santa and trying to find out a bit more about Santa. That was his moment. Other people will say that there are moments. Look, it's not so much critical, it's mainly the thinking. I just haven't quite got into the thinking thing yet, but I'm sure one day I will get there. Oh, look, I'm here with a few people at a dirty stop outs here. They're here for the very first time here at Skeptics in the pub. I know it's only early in the evening, but what's your name, sir?
James.
And?
Joseph.
Okay, now what got you along here? What you thought, I'll come along and do the Skeptics thing tonight. Why is tonight your first time?
I just want to see what this is about and try to learn and see what's new and what I'm missing.
Yeah, everyone sort of has their pet topic in skepticism, I find. For some people it's homeopathy, for some people it can be anything that really bugs them. Is there anything that bugs you that you went, oh, come on, people, think critically?
Not really. I think all decision or all ideas have its flaw and merits, and I'm interested to know what are the merits and what are the flaws.
Okay. Are you as even-handed as that, or you're the guy in the office that yells out, astrology's bullcrap?
I'd be the opposite end of the spectrum, and I think a lot of it, I work in health, so for me at the moment, a lot of it would be the immunisations at the moment. New Zealand's got a big measles outbreak. We've got muppets who are refusing to vaccinate their kids, so then they end up with deformities or death. Because people are ultimately inflicting their sort of biased ideas on their children. Yeah, the kids don't really get an informed choice on, and the parents certainly don't have an informed idea on. But yeah, no, it got me fired up seeing it.
Have you ever gone one-to-one arguing the point with an anti-vax person?
Usually I wouldn't tend to go one-to-one. I wouldn't tend to argue with people. I think if they're open to a good open dialogue and a good conversation where you can actually, hey, like, if I'm wrong, then yeah, that's absolutely fine. If they're wrong, that's absolutely fine. But the only way to really progress and sort of develop your ideas is to have a good dialogue, good discussion, and find out where each other's coming from. But some people, yeah, I find a lot of people I've talked to about anti-vax stuff, they tend to be fairly strong a certain way and don't tend to want to discuss it.
So are you one of these people that'll stay up late arguing with someone on the internet when you could be going to bed?
No, I go to bed.
Yeah, although I bet you are the guy who would.
I used to. But too many sleepless nights. So I've pulled back a lot on it, and I just think everyone's open to their own opinion and ideas, but it seems like here's a good place for a good dialogue, and that's sort of what drew me in. Usually, I've been to a couple of these, one in Ireland actually, where a similar sort of setup with good pub talks and stuff like that. And
have the Irish got a different bent to their skepticality? Is it an issue that they like to cover there in Ireland that we might be maybe not covering as much here? I mean,
politics for them seems to be a big one. Although that varies between the north and the rest of Ireland.
The EU wants to get a border back. They're going to put pressure on the Irish government to put a border back, and maybe the Irish government will just not be answering the phone that day.
I think there'll be a bit of sick leave used for that next month.
Yes.
Oh, that's my...
I think that's your food flashing there. Yeah, get some nutrients into you. Look, now, the question we are asking people tonight, the one that Richard wheeled out all the way from America or Atlanta or Greece or the Côte d'Ivoire or wherever he is this week, has asked me to do this for him and ask people, is there a skeptical moment or a turning point where you went, that's it, I want more critical thinking in my life right now? What event caused it? Did you have one? It's the thing where you either would have it or you just wouldn't. What about you?
I personally don't think that I ever had one specific moment where I suddenly became a skeptic, because I feel like I was always a little bit skeptical of various things, and I just over time I kind of changed my mind about stuff.
You mentioned earlier that your mum is into certain things that don't have as much sceptical track as they should, which I thought would make for great, interesting Christmas dinner conversations with your mum.
Yeah, look, I mean, generally speaking, my family is more supportive of some things that that don't have great evidence, like homeopathy and crystal healing and various other methodologies that aren't very evidence-based.
Crystal healing, that's one I haven't heard at a Skeptics meeting mentioned for quite some time. Traditionally, what would you do? Would the crystal just be near you, or would you have to have physical contact with it? How does it actually work from what you've seen anyway?
Well, I think, because I went to various alternative practitioners as a child, I don't think any of them... Like, many of them were primarily homeopaths that would, like, dabble in various other things. So I don't know if this is, proper crystal healing in inverted commas. But had one person who gave me a little test tube of containing like a crystal and a few pieces of fur and like some other sprinkly thing. Yeah, it was very odd. Okay. And then I had to carry...
Are you sure this wasn't this is getting towards witchcraft at this point?
Well, I mean, isn't homeopathy witchcraft anyway?
Controversial opinions here on a Thursday night. So you think that this is what turned you think?
I think over time... I think I always had a little bit of a kernel of disbelief within me, and over time I just became more confident in expressing that. So which is why I don't think I can necessarily pinpoint at one time where I was suddenly a skeptic or not.
Yeah. Look, something I'm pretty skeptical of, and I cop it a lot from my DJ friends, is I'm pretty much convinced that vinyl does not sound better than a digital signal. I'm sorry, the vinyl, it just sounds muffled. And if you like your sound muffled, that's fine.
I reckon you're probably not wrong there. I wonder if there's been any randomized controlled trials.
Oh, there has been, but they're a bit inconclusive sometimes. Skeptoid's done a good episode on it. Brian Dunning did one, and it can be a bit inconclusive because people bring their own biases, so you've got to make sure it's completely double-blind, like a medical thing. And I think it comes out about even in chance, I think, but some people do like a warm sound. So a muffled, warm sound, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I think it's a bit like eggs, right? And I saw people discussing this recently on Twitter. There's no evidence that organic eggs are any differently flavored to non-organic eggs. All eggs taste the same, basically, unless they're horribly poisoned. But there's something in the story of an egg that you've grown, or that your chickens have laid, that you've picked out of the hutch, that you've cracked open and cooked.
Can I use one of my favourite words now? I never get to say this word, but in this conversation it's relative. Cloaca. Cloaca, cloaca, cloaca. There you go. That's all I can say. Continue on.
Oh, yeah. Well, look, the cloaca...
Cloaca.
It doesn't come up
I know.
regularly.
I never get to use the word. I can't even write it on a sign and hold it up without getting in trouble.
Can I jump in with a joke?
Hang on, we've got a cloaca story here. Yes.
Where do chickens store their genitalia when they go to a nightclub?
I don't know. Where do chickens store their genitalia when they go to a nightclub?
The cloaca room.
Yeah, see? Oh, we're only jealous because we haven't got one.
It's absolutely. It's an all-purpose orifice.
Yeah, that's true. Well, evolution got 3 for the price of 1 there, really, didn't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, look, have a good night tonight. I hope you enjoy our talk. It's an environmental-based talk that's coming up here. Yes. And we'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Look, we're having a deep critical thinking conversation about the work of the Human League. I think everything the Human League did is pretty good, and I even like them now. And Phil Oakey, what a guy. And we've got Tim here. Tim.
Yeah, I'm president of the Anti-Human League.
Well, that's right, because you are of the opinion, which a lot of people are, that everything the Human League did before the Dare album was their good work.
Absolutely, I agree. I think every critic who is worth a pinch of poo agrees with that, actually, yes.
Well, so you're completely discounting Together in Electric Dreams?
Even the film.
You're discounting The Lebanon. That's a great track.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Perhaps it was his wired-up nipples and things, and ear to nip. I don't know.
Look, I enjoyed his lopsided hairdo. Of course, he's bald now, but the lopsided hairdo was good.
That's why he's bald now, actually. He'd never have a lopsided hairdo.
But Richards wanted me to ask people tonight about if there was an event or a thing that turned you into the critical thinker, and you went, oh, yeah, that's what it's all about.
Well, it's a long story, and let me tell you.
Okay. one of those people.
Yeah, no, it was probably a series of events, but really what first started me, well, what apparently started a lot of skeptics, was Erich von Däniken, our favourite ancient astronaut theorist. When I was a young whippersnapper, some excerpts of Chariots of the Gods ? Was published in a Sunday newspaper over 2 weeks. So the first one, everyone thought, wow, that's interesting. That's really quite exciting. And then the people wrote in and their letters were published in the next issue of the newspaper, and they said, fantastic, his archaeology is great, but I'm an astronomer and his astronomy is shit. Oh, wow. And other people would write in saying, oh, his astronomy is really good, but I'm an archaeologist, his archaeology is rubbish. Which proved two things, actually, that never trust a scientist outside of their field and never trust Erich von Däniken.
Oh, come on. Now, return to the stars. I've actually seen you giving away Erich von Däniken books at this very Skeptics in the pub.
I have, actually, yes, in the past, and they go like cold cakes.
So how did you end up with so many? Did someone bequeath a collection at some stage?
Someone bequeathed a huge collection. About 8 boxes turned up on my doorstep from a gentleman in Nowra who had probably finally had enough of them, actually, collecting dust. I've still got some of them, but I gave quite a few away. I should actually sadly point out that the president of the Skeptics at the time grabbed all of the von Däniken books. Because he too was an early deconvert of Erich von Däniken. So
I must say, if you can possibly find the movie that was the follow-up to Chariots of the Gods, it's hosted by William Shatner.
Right. Now, really, of course, yeah, William Shatner. If it wasn't Leonard Nimoy, so it's a Star Trek theme.
Yeah, yes, he's standing next to a model of the Enterprise at the beginning, and he's great. And I think he said later, he was just doing it for the money.
Really?
Shatner doing something for the... Shatner shilling for money? No.
What was his song, his big song he had that he...
There was the Has Been album that he did with Ben Folds.
No, but long earlier.
The Transformed Man.
60s?
Yeah, the Transformed Man. Have a listen to that, people. It is a great album.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure it is. And a lot of people did...
so basically, you've got Erich von Däniken to thank for being a skeptic.
I really do, actually, yeah. But then there was other things that cropped up along the way, like while dishing von Däniken, I still believed in things like Bermuda Triangle and stuff until you actually read some books that point out, unfortunately, that's not true. So it's a gradual process. I don't think anyone has a flash of light, on the road to Damascus sort of moment. But I think there's a gradual thing.
And what have we got tonight as our speaker, Tim?
We have an interesting talk about science being a bit cautious in the way it comes forward based on the issues of coal seam gas. And the person who's giving the talk is an environmentalist, and they are a science communicator, and they're also a citizen scientist, and so a bit of a campaigner about various coal seam gas sites in New South Wales.
Right. You don't get too many citizen High Court judges these days. I've found not many, not even on the internet.
No, you don't get as many amateur scientists too, making huge discoveries of planets and things. Yeah, times have changed.
And tonight is that night.
It is. That's the one. We found them. Yes.
Look, I have been asking people what was the sceptical moment that turned them into maybe a sceptical or critical thinker, but you've got an answer that a lot of people would have in that you didn't have one.
Yeah, I don't think I particularly had one. I guess I've always thought about questioning stuff. I remember thinking about when I was very young, like
you was going, why, Mum, why?
Yeah, why? Because I grew up in a default Christian household, sort of, very not very practicing or whatever, but just sort of there is a God, it exists, whatever. And I remember thinking to myself, in the playground, giving challenges to God just in my head, because he should be able to hear it. If you exist, then blah blah blah, and then trying to assess the results, but I don't know.
Right. So, so you were doing a non-double-blinded, small-scale experiment.
Yeah, just sort of in my head, which should be enough.
Will there be pizza for dinner tonight? Stuff like that.
I guess so. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And that was when I was pretty young, and then I guess as I grew up, I've come across all sorts of different people who have different views about things that I thought I knew more about, and that's made me learn to question things much better.
Right, so it's not so much a moment for some people, it's a journey, like life itself.
Very much so, yeah. Yeah.
Hey, look, I'm here with a serial complainer. I know he's had a lot to say about me over the years. How are you, Ken?
I'm fine. I'm still a grumpy old man.
Okay, well, look, I think you should wear that with pride.
Thank you very much.
So how many copies of Chariots of the Gods have you got at home?
I have read it, and I read the sequel, and I was absolutely disgusted. And this is back when I was a teenager, so I was a skeptic back then even.
You were a cranky young teenager back then?
I was a cranky young teenager, and I've developed it into PhD material.
Now, Richard sent me out asking people, was there a moment where you, or an event that triggered your scepticism and went, hey, I'm going to go down this path? Did that happen to you, or has it been a bit more like an evolution with you?
Well, actually, I think, as I said, I've always been rather sceptical, and following Eric von Däniken and that so on, I became an air traffic controller. Now, I worked in the aviation industry, and it's a very unforgiving and dangerous environment. So there is no room in there for Fruit Loopery. Everything is based on hard science. Everything you do has to be justified to a court. When I finished with air traffic control, I found it a difficult transition to go into the mainstream world where any sort of Fruit Loopery gets a hearing. But I never did anything about it until I saw how the anti-vaccination movement harassed grieving families, and I thought someone's got to do something about this, so I did.
Now, did this take the form of direct phone calls to them, or just talking about grieving families in the press?
No, it was a strange thing that the New South Wales legislation had been changed very recently to allow a complaint to the Healthcare Complaints Commission about unregistered practitioners. So I thought, I will test the legislation and put in a complaint about the Australian Vaccination Network and see what happens. And lo and behold, the HCCC, God bless them, they took up the complaint. Eventually it led to a public warning issued against the AVN, which we then used to discredit them in the media, which meant that the media no longer went to them for so-called informed comment, and it led to further legislation changes and politicians getting on side. It led to the no jab, no play, no jab, no pay things. So it all began back when the anti-vaccination Fruit Loops harassed a grieving family. If they had not done that, maybe none of this would have happened.
And that's what stepped up your scepticism.
Absolutely, and also being a grumpy old man who's retired.
So what do you do? Are you just sort of grumpy around the house these days? You're grumpy with your neighbours, with the lawn?
With the lawn, with the neighbouring kids. Just about anything you can think of, I'll be grumpy about. And as you noticed, I've moved on to chiropractors. Now there's a good target for anyone who's not even grumpy. There's a bunch of Fruit Loops if ever I've heard of any.
And they're getting into psychiatry?
We found a chiropractor who claims he can treat psychiatric illnesses. Now, to the average psychiatrist, this is just absolutely horrifying because psychiatric illnesses can lead to suicide. This is really serious stuff. So I'm determined to do something about it.
There's enough controversy about actual psychiatry without having it somebody else who isn't even using that.
That's right. We don't want to add to the Fruit Loopery.
Yeah.
Méta de choc.
Bonjour à tous, je m'appelle Elisabeth Feiti et je suis créatrice du podcast Méta de choc. 2 fois par mois, je vous propose de découvrir un nouvel invité pour explorer l'univers de la métacognition. Pourquoi nous pensons ce que nous pensons? Plusieurs de ces émissions sont sous-titrées en anglais. La dernière en date est même intégralement en anglais, puisque j'y échange avec Jessica Schaab, ancienne gourou du New Age devenue sceptique. Retrouvez-nous sur la chaîne YouTube de Méta de choc, METADECHOC. À bientôt.
Méta de choc.
Hello everyone, I'm Elisabeth Feiti, the creator of the French-speaking Méta de choc podcast. Twice a month, I host a new guest to explore the field of metacognition, why we think the way we think. Some shows are subtitled in English, and actually the latest one is all in English. An exclusive conversation with Jessica Schaab, an ex-New Age guru who turned skeptic. Join us on the Méta de choc YouTube channel, METADECHOC. À bientôt.
Méta de choc.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. Now I'm down here on Market Street near Embarcadero BART station, and just to see a wonderful old California, San Francisco streetcar, cable car rattle by. Van Ness Avenue, California, it says, and Market Street's, it's something you see out of the TV, out of the movies. It's a wonderful, well, it's a tourist attraction, I suppose. San Francisco Municipal Railway, it says. And there's a modest lineup here of people ready to get on. Coming up on next week's show, I hope to bring you some interviews from wonderful people I met at DragonCon, including the young author Bailey Harris. At 13, she has written 3 books on science for children. Also, it was my great pleasure to see Dr. Pamela Gay, and I think I'm going to line up an interview with her to find out what's going on as a skateboarder skates by in the next couple of weeks. But for this week, with the passing parade that is San Francisco, this is Richard Saunders signing off from San Francisco.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian Skeptics or any other skeptical organisation.